What's up guys, Asian here with another PTS video, and today we're going to be going over the werewolf changes for Greymoor. So much like how the vampires got a huge rework, werewolves also got a rework in their skill trees here, which actually bumped up their DPS by a metric butt ton, and also made werewolf tanks potentially viable, maybe not in trials, but definitely for 4-man content moving forward. This video is going to be focusing in on the DPS of werewolves, what changed there, and what you can expect to see from a werewolf DPS now. Tomorrow we'll be looking at the werewolf tank and how I would build a werewolf tank both for trials and for 4-man content. So first, let's talk about what exactly changed with the werewolves to kind of make them a lot more viable both as DPS and as tanks. The Werewolf Berserker and Were Pack Leader, your transformation ultimate essentially, got a little bit of a change. The core behind Werewolf Berserker still is there. You still get light attack bleeds, but your heavy attacks now deal some additional splash damage, which I don't believe is in the current morph as it is on live. You get the stamina increase and you get the stamina regen while you have it slotted. Pack Leader was changed, so now you get 10% damage mitigation. You still get the 2 direwolves, and you also automatically grant yourself and nearby allies minor courage. This is particularly important because now you don't have to run Yolnakreen, so you're just automatically apply minor courage, so don't have to worry about Yolnakreen at all. You already apply it, which is pretty important because as a werewolf you don't have access to the sword and shield taunt, you don't have access to the range taunt and rage, so you actually have to use a second set, Tormentor, in order to actually taunt things. So basically by replacing Yolnakreen with Tormentor, that sort of evens out that sort of tanking utility that you commonly see in group content. A pretty big change there for Pack Leader, particularly making werewolf tanks very viable now. Next we have Pounce. Both morphs got a change here, so both of them do still have the Pounce, and it does deal damage right away, but now both of them have what's called Carnage if you activate ability again within 5 seconds after you do the Pounce. Both of them apply a bleed, a 10-second bleed, and they also deal up to 450% more damage to enemies under 100% health. This does scale linearly, so basically for every 1% missing health, you deal an additional 4.5% additional damage. So if you're at 50% health, for example, your bleed will deal additional 225% more damage. Brutal Pounce will increase your weapon damage by 100 for each enemy hit, up to a maximum of 6 times. So the way that this actually ends up working out is if you hit 6 enemies with your Pounce, because it does have a little bit of an AOE here, you get 600 weapon damage, but if you actually activate Brutal Carnage before your stack of weapon damage runs out, you actually get a second stack against a single target here. And I believe it is reflected in combat metrics, so I'll show you guys the combat metrics report to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. Feral Pounce will now restore stamina whenever you deal damage, and it also extends your werewolf transformation timer. So Feral Pounce will probably be more useful for tanks. Brutal Pounce will be more useful for DPS, obviously because of the additional weapon damage increase. But both of them should be useful for tanks, but I think Feral Pounce will probably be a little bit better just because it does extend your werewolf transformation and gives you a little bit of additional sustain. Hircine's Bounty, which is the heal, still heals you based on the percentage of your actual health remaining, but both of them did see a bit of a change here. So first, Hircine's Rage will give you 3,000 stamina if you're at full health, and you also get Major Berserk for 6 seconds. The downside is you also take 20% more damage, so you're kind of trading off extra damage for taking extra damage as well. Both of these abilities will give you Major Brutality while you have it slotted here, which is really great, so now you might not need to run weapon power potions any longer, which is important because this ability uses magicka. So you will actually be using tri-stat potions rather than weapon damage potions to maintain that additional Major Berserk. Now, Hircine's Fortitude increases stamina and health regen by 5% of the healing caused for 6 seconds, and then still, if you're at full health, you get the stamina back, and you still get the Major Brutality while you have it slotted. So obviously, Fortitude is more for tanks, Rage is going to be more for yes. Then we have Roar. Both of them will now fear enemies for 4 seconds and also sets them off balance for 7 seconds. Ferocious Roar, your heavy attacks are 33% faster for 10 seconds after casting, so you basically have faster heavy attacks here. Deafening Roar also leaves enemies dazed, which applies major fracture and minor maim. So you're still able to apply fracture and maim as a werewolf tank if you use Deafening Roar, which is great. So this is a 10-second duration here, so you do need to use it every 10 seconds. And both of these abilities, while you have it slotted, you gain Major Savagery, which gives you weapon crit. So again, you're able to use tri-stat potions in order to maintain Hircine's Rage now as a DPS instead of having to rely on weapon damage potions. Then we have Howl of Despair, or Piercing Howl is the initial morph. Both of these deal additional damage to enemies who are facing you. This is going to be your primary spammable, which is pretty strong, 15k physical damage on Howl of Despair, a little bit less on Howl of Agony. Howl of Agony just basically gives you a little bit additional damage when enemies who are feared are facing you when you use this ability. But Howl of Despair is actually going to be more useful because it provides allies defeating Frenzy synergy, which gives them unlimited empowered for 5 seconds. It's just an additional synergy. Your tanks can take them if they need Alkash, for example. Your second tank, your DPS can obviously use the additional empower bonus. So despite the fact that Howl of Agony does deal more damage, Howl of Despair is going to end up being more useful because it ends up boosting overall group DPS. Then we have Claws of Life or Claws of Anguish. Both of these pretty much have remained more or less unchanged here. Claws of Life still heals you for the amount of damage over time caused. Claws of Anguish still deals Major Defile. The only real change here is that enemies that are hit by the initial hit now get the disease status effect, which provides Minor Defile. So Claws of Anguish is a double whammy if you're using it in PvP. Major Minor Defile, you're getting a heck of a ton of healing received reduction there. So pretty strong for PvP. You're still going to use Claws of Life for PvE though. The passives were also changed, I believe. Pursuit gives you additional weapon speed and also increases the stamina you get back when you heavy attack. Not particularly useful here. Blood Rage it hasn't really changed too much. Whenever you deal damage, you just get some more additional werewolf transformation timer. Blood Moon and Devourer haven't changed. Savage Strength increases weapon damage by 18% and also increases resistance by 10,000. That wasn't changed, I believe. Then Call the Pack reduces the cost of remaining in your werewolf transformation for each werewolf you have in your group. Yeah, it also hasn't changed too much. The passives haven't really changed too much. It's mostly the active abilities here. So the big thing, obviously, is that Brutal Pounce with that huge scaling execute just makes it very powerful for PvE. Yes, along with the additional weapon damage that you're getting up to additional 600 weapon damage if you're timing it correctly. Of course, the Major Berserk with Hircine's Rage is another huge buff. The only other way to get Major Berserk is by synergizing with the Sorcerer's Storm Action Act Ultimate, so you pretty much have an on-demand Major Berserk here. Yes, you are taking more damage, but a lot of damage in Trials is relatively avoidable, and 20% more damage isn't actually that much, all things taken into consideration here. It pretty much negates one of your CP passives, which is not that big of a deal. Yes, you're going to have to pay a little bit more attention to where you are and what sort of damage you're taking, but for the most part, you don't even need to activate it. So if you know you're going to get hit with a lot of damage incoming, you don't have to activate it. You can just wait for that damage phase to go away, and then you can activate Major Berserker that way. Another big change is the fact that you have Major Brutality and Major Savagery now with Ferocious Roar and Hircine's Rage, which allows you to use Tri-Potions to help maintain Hircine's Rage here. Now, the one thing with Hircine's Rage is you have to be at full health to get the Major Berserk, so it's not going to always be useful, but when you can activate it, it's actually really nice here. And of course, Howl of Despair being your new spammable basically means it's less a brain dead rotation. I know the kind of appeal behind Werewolf DPS is the fact that you can just light attack spam, but here, now we're actually getting an actual rotation here where you have to keep track of 2 dots, use Howl of Despair to spammable, and take advantage of Hircine's Rage when we can. So this is actually a pretty big change overall to Werewolf DPS. Now, how does Werewolf DPS actually compare to your standard DPS? So I am on a stam sort here. And I did actually lag out here, so I did happen to save the parses though. So this parse here is actually in my human form. So this is your typical Stamsork build here. This is the setup that I had. Celine's, Reliquins, Laquestes here, double drive with health poisons. We were using the Unstable Clan Fear. You can see all the abilities right here. Pulled pretty good, 85.8k here. Now, if we take a look at the Werewolf parse, this is the higher parse actually, 86.8k here. So if we take a look here, let's see, precision, nope, that's, here, there's Brutal Carnage here. So you can see that you can get up to 6 stacks of Brutal Carnage. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can actually maintain that. So again, Brutal Carnage is additional weapon damage that you get, so this gives us a base additional 600 weapon damage. So you're able to stack this 6 times if you activate Brutal Carnage before your first stack of Brutal Carnage ends up running out. So it's important that you manage to never let this run out, so that way you're able to stack it up to 6 times here for the 600 additional weapon damage. There are obviously some weirdness here, so I believe this is the Werewolf Bleed and so on. And I also didn't actually optimize my blue CPs at all, so I can probably maybe pull out some more DPS if I use my blue CPs a little bit differently. But the setup here is going to be a little bit different. So we are going to use Sogvins instead of Lokestis because we still want that minor force here. We don't have Barbed Trap, so we need some way of getting minor force. You could also use Lokestis regardless for the Major Slayer, but Sogvins ends up doing a little bit better. With Sogvins, you also get physical penetration bonus on that 4th piece, so you can now use Precise on the axe instead of using Sharpened here. That allows you to maintain the same sort of 61 points in the piercing. Alternatively, you could just keep Sharpened and just change your blue CPs around. It's kind of up to you, but Precise on your offhand is going to be a little bit better here. And you can see here, we're doing better than our Stamsork build. Now, of course, it's not that big of a difference. You're talking about a 1k difference or so, so still roughly within the margin of error. Crit RNG could play a role in sort of determining which one's stronger here, but the fact that Werewolf DPS now is matching your Stamsork build here, whereas previously Werewolf DPS was absolute garbage compared to an actual, light attack stamina DPS build, is a huge buff to Werewolf DPS and actually makes them incredibly viable for PvE DPS. It's still going to be something that I would caution on because this is in a trial, this isn't on dummy. So we're able to get really good uptime on Major Berserk here. So if you take a look at our uptime for Major Berserk, we have 89% uptime Major Berserk. In an actual raid environment, this is going to be significantly lower because you need to be at max health. Plus, you have to make sure you're not going to take too much damage because you are taking 20% more damage when you have Major Berserk active. So if you cut this down in about half uptime, maybe 40%, 33% uptime, your obviously DPS is going to end up going down by a fair amount here. But it is still going to be respectable enough that you can viably bring a Werewolf DPS to trials now and not necessarily get laughed off. Of course, this does mean you will need to learn new rotation because it's not simply just light attack spamming anymore. But the trade-off is, of course, that you're able to pull 80k easily in a trial environment now. So huge buffs to Werewolf DPS. And so for those of you guys who like playing Werewolf DPS in PvE, this is definitely a good change for you guys in Greymoor. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.